Like our content? Support us on Patreon, link below.
Welcome to the Twisted Tentacle Inn. I'm your innkeeper, Vase Odin, and in today's episode of Forbidden Knowledge, we'll be discussing Crack the Case. Forbidden! Crack the Case is a zero-cost seeker event from the Secret Name Mythos pack. It has one intellect icon and reads, Fast. Play when an investigator discovers the last clue at your location. Investigators at that location gain X resources distributed as you wish. X is the location's shroud value. An interesting concept. But who can benefit from this card? Well, most seekers playing higher education from the Blood on the Altar Mythos pack can benefit. Getting more resources to feed cards that hunger for more is always good. Daisy Walker has expensive mystic cards that she needs to pay for, and her high intellect means this card will fire off pretty easily for her, so she can definitely benefit. Ursula from Forgotten Age can benefit because she is always on the move. Not using an action to gain the resources is huge for allowing her to continue to move along. Jenny Barnes from the Dunwich Legacy expansion also likes a card like this, mostly because she can never have too many resources. Although with only 5 out-of-class cards, you'll have to consider whether this is something good enough to take up a couple of those spots. Carolyn from the Circle Undone likes this card if she's using a resource pump build with cards like Physical Training from the core set and Keen Eye from Blood on the Altar Mythos pack. Marie from the Circle Undone has expensive mystic cards as well, but her limited seeker slots means that you'd have to have a deck that really depends on resources to really benefit from this card in a great manner. Now, Joe Diamond from the Circle Undone and Roland Banks have very expensive Guardian cards that they need to pay for. Joe can put this card in his Hunch deck, making it more likely for him to see it each game. Although, I honestly think this spot in the Hunch deck is better left for other more expensive cards. I would actually use this in his regular deck. His access to expensive Guardian cards, like Something Worth Fighting For, Dynamite Blast, and the many firearms and such, means that he's always happy to see more resources. And Roland Banks, although he has a similar card pool, Roland has the added benefit in that he can kill a creature in a very high shroud location and play this card, giving a large amount of resources to him and not having to use an action to grab the clue and not having to worry about failing an investigation check. This leads me to the card interactions for this card. I highly recommend using this card with free clue gathering cards on high shroud locations. Every investigator that can use this card has access to getting clues for free. Roland can kill an enemy or use Scene of the Crime from the Threads of Fate Mythos pack. The Seekers can all use Art Student or Working Hunch from the core set on a high shroud location. Now that said, don't wait for a really high shroud location to use this card. Using this in a 2 shroud location makes it at least as good as Emergency Cash, mostly because this doesn't take an action. So using it on a 2 shroud location and then using an action to get a resource makes it equivalent to Emergency Cash. With Cash, you have to use an action to play the card to gain 3 resources. So in the end, you spend the exact same amount. This means that if you use this card on a 3 shroud location or higher, it puts you ahead of Emergency Cash. In general, using it on a 3 shroud location is ideal and generally is what you'd need anyways. Now, speaking of Emergency Cash, I guess we can take this opportunity to compare the 2 cards. In my opinion, both cards are good and have their uses. In my opinion, Emergency Cash is at its best in your opening hand, and if you're playing a deck that requires a lot of resources to set up their board, then this card is going to be the superior one. It also works great for pump decks that use cards like the aforementioned Keen Eye and Physical Training. Crack the Case, on the other hand, feels more like a mid to late game card. For pump builds, I like it more than Cash because it's a free action, and like I mentioned earlier, it just takes a 2 shroud location to make it equivalent to Cash. making it better than cash for every point of shroud above 2. So if you really think about it, in a 4 shroud location, you're already getting the benefits of 2 emergency cash. So that is huge. For those wondering how I got there, you can play Crack the Case as a free action when clearing a 4 shroud location, and then spend 2 actions getting 2 resources, putting you at 6 total resources. Or you can play 2 copies of emergency cash for the same amount of resources, spending the same amount of actions. So playing 2 of these in a scenario on 4 shroud locations is equivalent to having 4 emergency cash in your deck. This is why I love this card. Now for a caveat. I think this card works best in solo, where you will nearly always be at the location when its final clue is discovered. In multiplayer it can work, but it definitely loses a bit of its oomph. If you're the primary clue gatherer for your team of investigators, you'll probably be fine. But in a team of generalists, expect to have this sit in your hand for a while before you can play it, unless you and 1 or more investigators are constantly at the same location. It's also not as good for setting up your board as emergency cash, since it's rare that you'll benefit from it on turn 1. You can, but it's rare. All that said though, don't underestimate the power of it being a fast action to play. The fact alone means that this card can get you resources and you can keep moving on without having to spend an action. To make up for its multiplayer limitations, the card adds another great use. If you happen to be at a location with another investigator when the last clue is discovered, you have the option to share some or all of your winnings with that investigator. This adds a bit of versatility and makes this card useful for support investigators like Carolyn Fern and Min Typhon. Now, something to keep in mind is you can't benefit from this in a location that has, say, obscuring fog on it. The timing window isn't there, so when you discover the final clue, the obscuring fog goes away before you can play Crack the Case, so you're not going to get the 2 extra resources. But you can combo this with Ancient Stone, unidentified, from the Forgotten Age Deluxe expansion. Play Ancient Stone and effectively give yourself an additional 3 resources, because the shroud value has now become higher, a winning combination that will make you rich in one awesome move. If you had originally skipped over this card, I hope this video has incentivized you to give it another look. If you already like this card, I hope that this video has given you a new appreciation for it. And that does it for today's episode of Forbidden Knowledge. If you found it helpful, please consider clicking the thumbs up and sharing the video. If you have any questions, leave them
Down there
in the comments below. This is Innkeeper Vase Odin from the Twisted Tentacle Inn. Check in anytime. I'll talk with you then.